Attention parents and coaches. Do you wish you had a safe social media platform for your youth athletes? Fortunately for you, there's a revolutionary new app that helps with just that. Introducing Small Player, Big Play. Small Player, Big Play app provides young athletes, parents, and coaches a user-friendly sports social media platform. The app allows users to connect with friends, make new friends, create groups, text, chat, and post pictures and videos of you and your teammates participating in your favorite sport or activity. To begin, users can simply download and sign up for the app using an email account. Younger users have the ability to sign up using their smartphone and a parent's email address. From there, users can begin to interact and engage with other users of the app. Small Player Big Play app also gives users the ability to live stream full games and events. You can live stream your event so that friends, family, or anyone in the world can see you in action. Users can also share posts from the app to their other social media accounts like Facebook and Twitter. What are you waiting for? Get in the game and share your love of sports with the world. Download the Small Player Big Play app today.
Are you ready to listen to my dad Joe and Uncle Justin talk about sports? Now on with the show.
The Joe Mays and J-Raff Show is brought to you by Mays Sandwich Shop, which have been serving the greater West Lawn area delicious food for over 70 years. You are listening to the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show.
Boring.
A weekly podcast about sports since 2011.
Don't you ever get tired of being wrong all the time?
With a focus on football.
Kansas City 31, San Francisco 20. Mahomes takes the snap. He is just going to throw it long for Demarcus Robinson. It is going to use up all the time. The game is over, and the Chiefs' kingdom has firmly planted its flag on top of football's highest summit. The Kansas City Chiefs are champions of Super Bowl 54.
Now, here are your hosts, Joe Mays and Justin Raffoff. I gotta be honest, this is one of the first times in a long time that I don't want to hear anything about the Kansas City Chiefs. That's where I'm at right now.
Hey, I've been there. I've been there plenty this year, so don't worry. I'm not going to
look in the long run. I have nothing against the Chiefs
in
any capacity, but today I am not a Chiefs fan. I'm not happy about it. It is what it is. It wasn't a great sports weekend for me in so many ways.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty good.
So many ways. Not ideal. Not ideal. But this is I'm just one person. Like, we all have different viewpoints and rooting interests, and Justin and I are going to dive into that. Welcome to episode 319 of the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show. I'm Joe Mays, and sitting across from me is Mr. Justin Raffoff.
Yeah, it's good to be here. It's crazy, 319. That's a lot.
Yeah, it is. That is a lot. It's a big number.
Yeah,
big number. And,
so real quick, it just is the patch on the Dolphins. Is it 341?
347.
Okay, 347.
This.
So today, my son was like, "Oh my gosh, the Dolphins! They have something special on their uniform," and I thought he was going to talk about the patch. And I was like, "Oh, what, buddy?" I was like, "Yeah, that's for." And he's like, "No. The Dolphin has a helmet on." I was like, yeah.
Because they were wearing what they should be wearing all the time.
Right, and he was a fan. He loved it.
Let me tell you, Austin, I am right there with you.
Yeah.
I am right there with you, bud.
So he was a fan. He was rooting for the Dolphins today. So he was a little upset.
I appreciate that. I also appreciate him rooting for Navy yesterday.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that a sore subject?
So
I mean, it shouldn't be because Army won. So
and he was not happy about that. He goes, they were so good last year, and this year they can't do anything.
He's not wrong.
I'm like, well, yes,
very astute observation from your offspring.
Yeah, I told him, and I tried to tell him over and over, because, look, I want Army to win. But like, okay,
You want to sleep well at night.
Right.
You need Army to win, just like you
But
need Pittsburgh to win tonight,
Right.
and even Baltimore to win tomorrow. Maybe. I don't know. It
so
depends on who you're talking
actually,
to.
well, yes, yes. In my house, I
Literal
actually heard
brick.
when they were going over the schedules, like they were talking about, and tomorrow night's matchup of Browns and Ravens, and I heard not from me, go Browns in my house, and then I heard immediate like, oh my gosh, what am I saying?
Oh man.
I mean, depending on how you look at it, they're both kind of the Browns, but so I was trying to tell my son yesterday before the game, I'm like, look, man, I was trying to give him the lesson in like, if you're going to give it, you have to take it. Like, if you run around yelling, go Navy, crush Army, if and when that doesn't happen, you need to be prepared. And my wife did a little bit. I did it more, including like when I was leaving his room last night when I put him to bed.
Oh, you were rubbing it in.
So I was just like, oh, one more thing. And he's like, what? I was like, go Army, beat Navy. And one guy's like,
So I clue me in to, because we texted about this. Obviously, this whole week we were texting back and forth, and yesterday we had the gifts go in, which I retaught my dad how to do that. That was a mistake, because on top of all the other stuff we're going to talk about with Penn State, the Dolphins, sports betting, the Army-Navy game, I had a side bet with my dad on Army-Navy, and I told you he gave me points.
Right.
It didn't matter because Navy didn't score a single one.
Right. At halftime, it would have mattered.
Well, and then when I thought they scored a touchdown, I was like, this is great.
Right.
I'm about to go up 7-3, and he gave me 4.5 points. I've got more than a touchdown and 2-point conversion lead.
Right.
I was like, they can score and get a 2-point conversion. It doesn't matter.
Man.
But everything went downhill from there. And I'm not going to back down from it. Obviously, I was rooting for Navy. I've been rooting for Navy hardcore for close to the last decade.
Well, yeah.
I've always rooted for Navy, but it was just always another game, and I finally really got into it over the last decade, especially the last 6 years or so. Mm-hmm. And I'm wearing my Navy hat, and I left the Navy helmet in front of Justin. I don't know if you can really see that on the camera, but I also have last year's helmet sitting on the mixing board, which you should be able to see on the one camera. But it wasn't Navy's day. After like your son said, they could do everything right last year, 31-7. Well, I texted you that crazy stat.
Yes.
Malcolm Perry.
Yes.
On the season last year for Navy, rushed for over 2,000 yards. And entering the game against Army, the Navy quarterbacks had only rushed total the whole season, and this was in, 9 games or something like that? 178, I think it was. Talk about production drop-off.
Yeah. Yeah. And the hard thing is, I doubt they're 1,900 yards above average or above last year's numbers from the other positions, you know. I'm sure they're getting more, but it's a drop off. And then to have to play it at West Point.
Yeah.
So.
Well, Navy was 3-0 at West Point until that game.
I know. Army had never beat Navy at West Point.
So they're at Marquee Stadium, which is cool. I would like to go to a game there.
Oh,
You've
it's
been
incredible,
to a game there, yes?
Yes, and we actually contacted the family that I went with yesterday. We sent a message to them just talking about how into the game my son was, and
didn't tell him.
We left out Navy, some of the details, but just how I kept talking about when I was there and all that stuff, and it was really cool. It was really cool.
Yeah, so, and obviously we would like to go someday. We were hoping it was this year. Obviously that didn't work out for a variety of reasons. But in the next year or two, I think that's the plan.
Yeah.
So hopefully we can work it out. We'll see if we can get something done. And the pregame stuff was awesome.
Oh, gosh.
The marching.
See, that's the thing.
The pump-up video, the hype videos are
I
so
like
good.
that kind of stuff everywhere. So, when we go up to Penn State, and obviously not this year, but I've been to a lot of Penn State games, and so have you. But even now, when we go up, I like to be in my seat, at least a half an hour before the kickoff, because I want to see when the team leaves the field. I want to see when the band comes onto the field. I want to see when the team runs out and the place goes nuts and they show the hype video, and I want to experience all that stuff. And that's half an hour of stuff at Penn State. Especially if it's a Big Ten game and they play the other teams, fight song, and then they play Penn State's and the floating lion, all that stuff. Like, I just want to take it all in. Like, that's part of the experience. You don't get that at like professional sports. You get that at college football games, and that's part of what I love about college football, just that whole atmosphere. But man, at any of the academy games, but at the Army-Navy game, the march on, like all that stuff, oh my gosh, like that's just... I remember talking a few years ago on the sideline of a Wilson game, we were talking to our buddy, I can't think of his name, he was one of the photographers, we were talking to him about Lee Vivian.
Oh, Lee, okay.
Yeah.
Didn't get to see Lee.
Right, I know, this year we didn't get to see Lee, but like... and he was talking about how he's photographed some of them, right? And he was just talking about how crazy it is, and like crazy in a good way, but just like how awesome an experience it really is.
It's a spectacle in every way, but like in a good way, not like this is over the top.
No,
this is amazing.
No, it's not like making a spectacle for the spectacle's sake. It's just like this is.
It is a spectacle,
right? Yes,
we're not trying to make it. It just is.
Right. So like, oh man, it is cool. I really want to get to so I've been to West Point, and I was once, and I was there for like the weekend. I saw a hockey game, I saw a football game, like it was really cool. I've been to Annapolis and the Naval Academy a number of times for water polo, so I've been on the Naval Academy campus and in their facilities there a bunch of times. Not for a while, but a bunch of times. I've been to the Air Force Academy with my sister living in Colorado. I've had the experience, walked around there. And I want to go to a game there just because it would be cool. I also want to go to a game at Colorado, Boulder. Like, it's only like 20 minutes, half hour from my sister. And I've been by the stadium there. But, like, I want to go to a game there. My dream is some fall to, like, go to, like, a Thursday night, like Colorado or Air Force game. Sometimes they play like crazy, schedules, and then like see the other one on like Saturday. Like, so Friday night or Saturday. Fall football usually is not like, those other nights are hard to get to. Right. And also that's in Colorado. So who knows when or if that'll ever happen. But those academy games are just so cool.
Yeah. And Army plays the Air Force next week.
Right. For the Commander-in-Chief trophy now. Yeah.
So I know they were talking about if Navy could have pulled the upset yesterday, which for a while I thought there was a possibility of it.
Oh, yeah.
Until that goal line stand. That kind of was the huge momentum swing. But
even then, like, all right, you got them backed up, but they couldn't really carry that momentum. And then Army was able to get their big play. Like, so.
Yeah. So the final score is 15-0. It's the first time Army shut out Navy since 1969. Yeah. Crazy to think of. After winning 14 in a row, Navy's now lost 4 of the last 5.
14 in a row is nuts.
14 in a row is crazy, but I don't like 4 of the last 5. I was happy about last year winning. That was a commanding victory last year for Navy, 31-7.
I don't know that you saw. So on College Game Day, they were talking about it, and so they go live Zoom to the Navy coach.
Numatolo?
Right, and he kind of tongue-in-cheek is just like, oh man, I thought I was watching like the Army pep rally this morning, the way you guys are talking to him, just kind of giving him a hard time. Somebody mentioned it's been a little rough as of late. He's like, oh, you're just skipping over last year. Like, he was just giving it, not rude, I don't want to give that impression at all, but like he
was needling them.
He knew his stuff, and he was throwing it back at them just as fast as it was coming, and they were like, oh my God, they were laughing. They thought it was funny because he wasn't giving the traditional coach speak, basically. He was full in on it. Like, it was really cool.
Yeah. Well, I like Coach Ken. He's done a phenomenal job at Navy. And although I saw an article in The Athletic talking about how Monken and Numatolo, when is a Power 5 team going to come and grab them? Right. And I was like, well, you can take Monken. That's fine with me.
Yeah, you're probably like, please.
But you can take him away, because he's been there since, 2014 at Army?
So.
Something like that?
So here's the thing. Like, where do you go? So it's interesting, because the guy who was at Navy before, Paul something, went to Georgia Tech.
Johnson.
Yeah, Paul Johnson went to Georgia Tech.
Yeah. That was a
And-
while ago now.
Oh, that's a long time. He's no longer at Georgia Tech.
Like 2004 or
But
something
yeah,
like
he was
that.
there a long time. And it was one of those where, like, especially early on, it worked at Georgia Tech, but not.
With Calvin Johnson. Like,
Yeah, gosh.
like, how do you have an offense
Calvin Johnson was Calvin Johnson for Georgia
for
Tech,
Georgia Tech running that
and
offense?
the Detroit Lions.
Oh, sorry, Calvin. Sorry, Megatron.
Right. And he still put up the numbers he put up.
Yeah,
Think about that.
crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy. So, well, I don't want to spend all the whole
I
show
know.
talking Army Navy, although honestly we could,
Right.
and it would be fun.
Yeah, especially this year.
Especially for the last 5 years. I love the special uniforms that they really embraced that since I think about 2012,
Yeah,
2013.
Again,
They've gone full 7 years, like with each team
they were
having
talking.
brand new uniforms.
They were talking about how they put about 2 years,
2 years,
of
yeah,
work
I saw
into
that
each one,
special before
and
the
they were like,
game.
"Oh, so they're like, you
know-
could, like, you know what like what's in store." They're like, "Yeah, so you could tell us." He's like, "Upon penalty of death, I am not going to tell you."
Well, but think about it. Like, this isn't something that they announced over the summer. They literally announced it like 10 days before the game.
Right, and what's great is, at any other school, it would leak.
Yeah.
It would leak.
But not in the
Doesn't leak
military
there.
academies,
Imagine that.
Yeah.
Which is, we'll chalk that up as a very good thing.
Very good
Like,
thing, yeah. That you can keep your intelligence to yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Because
Army
what
and-
if they couldn't keep the?
But that also, like, you know that Nike and Under Armour, like, have to also, like, they're involved.
Oh, absolutely.
Is what is Army? Because Navy is Under Armour.
Army's Nike.
Okay, Navy is
Yeah.
Under Armour. So
It's kind of crazy that they're not all the same. You would
Right.
like. I mean, I understand they're separate schools, but like,
right. It all falls under the same purview of
right. Although with Navy too, like, yeah, Under Armour, that Maryland, D.C. metro area is like Under Armour
that's true.
galore.
That's true.
So
I and obviously I'm completely biased on this, but I like Navy stuff better than Army stuff.
no, I understand. I understand.
And that's why I have all the helmets, because all the helmets they come out with are amazing, and the ones that are
Ah, man.
individualized ones I can't get because they're individualized.
Right.
Because the Blue Angel one wasn't. That was the same pattern.
Right.
I want that, but you have to hand paint it. Like, it's not something you can print a sticker out.
Right.
The same thing
because
with
it's the whole thing.
Same
Like,
thing
it's
with
not,
the ships from a few years
Yes.
ago.
Oh
Like,
my gosh,
they
those
had
are so
6
cool.
or 7 different ships by football positional grouping.
Right.
Like, the quarterbacks were aircraft carriers. The linebackers, I think, were minesweepers or something like that.
Right.
Like, I obviously want both of those. You can't get them anywhere.
Right.
I don't know if I'm going to get the marble one this year, which it's so cool because it has the marble from the Annapolis buildings, the hall, but it also looks like water. Like,
Right.
it had
Right.
such a dual work. It's very cool. I jumped on and got the jacket that's behind me now. Because I just really like the pattern. So I'm hoping one of those helmets can be mimicked in some way. I finally found the one from the last 2 years, 2018 and 2019. So
Right.
I'm going to hopefully add
like,
that to my collection
I just
soon.
love how they, like, so yeah, it is incredible. I love when they do like the special groups, and that's kind of what Army has done the last couple of years, like focused on specific like groups, and just like the stories and things that go along with them. Like,
Well, like this year was the Tropic Lightning.
yeah. So like,
And-
it's just so crazy, like hearing some of those stories.
And a couple years, like 2 years ago, they did the first infantry, like
Right,
that was the snow
yes,
one, right?
yes.
And they were all white.
Right, they all
In
were
the
all white,
snow,
and then it
and playing in
snowed.
the snow,
Right,
yeah.
that was the year against the Blue Angel one.
Well, and that's
Yes.
what they were laughing. They were like, a few years ago, Army's wearing white and it snows, and this year we're up at Marquee Stadium and they're wearing green and match the turf in the fog. Like, yeah, but it's just so cool. Like, and being a uniform helmet guy, and then loving Army Navy and seeing them embrace this, and like everyone is just, it's so cool what they
Right,
what
it
they
is
did.
cool. And what makes it, I don't know, it's cool because it's like, it would be cool if they just did these like, and they kind of do these like one-offs, but like they just, it's not like they just like come up with some crazy color scheme or things
No,
like
there's
that.
a reason
Which is
behind
also cool for other
everything.
schools, because that, like, what story is Oregon going to give me with some kind of uniform? They might have a story for something specific, but like, for the most part, it's just like, oh, we think this looks cool, which is
Right.
fine. Like, and I'm all into that too. But like these, like, there are stories behind them, and it's just cool.
And I don't know if I'm getting this exactly right, but the Navy helmets had 6 gold stripes down the middle because of the 6 original ships.
That's awesome.
I don't remember if it was 6 ships or 6 ship types. But
Right,
it was something like
right,
that. There was a
yeah.
reason for everything they do. And then I
Right.
always love, and this is Army Navy, that everyone wears the patch of the group that they're
Yes.
associated
Yes,
with.
yes.
And it's just like listening to the story, because that always comes up. They talked about the one Navy defensive lineman, how well he had no plans to go into the Marines, and that's where he's going. He's
Right.
going to be a Marine ground assault or something like
Right.
that. And they're like, yeah, I guess you'd want him on your side. Like,
Right,
yeah, I'm glad
right.
he's on the Navy defensive line.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much. I'll take that.
Oh, was that 94? Who went
90
through? And,
I think it was
okay,
96.
Okay,
I
he
think it
went through and like wrecked the play a few times. But yeah, it is an incredible one, and then it just to see him, like, I forget which guy it was, but the guy who made like maybe the last tackle for Army, when he got over to the sideline and he's just like,
Yeah,
you know, like
the raw emotion.
the emotion like that overcomes these guys. It's just, it's cool.
It's America's game for a
Right.
reason, and it just means more. And
Yes.
for those of you that are on the fence, never watch it, didn't really care, I invite you to look up the hype videos that are produced by usually CBS,
Right.
but sometimes the individual, Navy and Army will
Right.
also come up with their own. But the ones that CBS does, are down the middle and playing both sides, because they're just
they have-
showing why
right.
it means so much, why they're important, the history. It's very cool. Definitely check those out. So I came off of a betting loss to my dad
right.
because he pulled for Army and they won, and so I lost that. Then I took some of the free money over the summer. I signed up for FanDuel. You
Right.
get free money.
Right.
And I made a few bets over the summer, and I came out and I won. And this is nothing major,
No,
and
no.
I'm not into sports betting at all. But I was just letting that money sit there, and this weekend I was just like, yeah, you know what? I'm going to take some of the free money that I tripled, and I'm going to throw some of it and see if I could do that again. Because that would be fun. So yesterday, before the game, I decided to go Michigan State plus 14.5.
Which
Because
I told
was
you was a smart bet.
Not convinced that Penn State could cover that.
Was more than 2 touchdowns better than
I
Michigan
wasn't
State?
sure Penn State was going to win outright. And if you're giving me 14.5, I'm going to take that.
That's a big spread.
I was just like, Penn State hasn't won at home yet.
Right.
And even if they beat Michigan State, they have to beat them by 15 or more. That's not going to happen, right?
Right. No.
How much did Penn State win by yesterday?
Did they win by 15?
15.
Yeah.
I had 14.5. So that was a little depressing. I mean, obviously, I'm happy Penn State won.
Right.
And I still wanted them to win, just by a little bit less.
Right.
Just by like a
by
point,
14.
by a point less. And it was Michigan State was driving at the end.
Right.
And I was like, just kick a field goal. I don't care. Just do something. Because we saw who did that a few years ago when Penn State then started taking timeout. Wasn't that Michigan State? Wasn't Sparty?
No, well, they did it against Buffalo in a game,
was it Buffalo?
or one of those games where like they were like blowing somebody out, but they were driving trying to score, so they're trying to score. So Franklin's like, we compete to the end, and he took a timeout to freeze the
Was that
kicker,
Buffalo?
or
Was it when
someone
they were
like
up
that,
like 60-0 or something?
something like that. Yeah.
Well, anyways, that didn't end up happening. Michigan State didn't get any points at the end, so I lost that bet, which was disappointing. But again, this is not technically my money that I'm working
Right.
with, so it is what it is. But Penn State won. They looked better.
But we also had that discussion again of like, how did
Does
they
Vegas
pick
do this?
Penn State 14.5?
And then Penn State wins by 15.
Wins by 15 in a game where you and I both were like, I don't know that Penn State's going to win outright,
Right.
let alone win by 15
Win
points.
by
and
more than
and they're
14
they're
and a half,
on the
yeah.
money.
They're exactly there. I mean, Penn State was losing 21-10. I was feeling pretty good for my money, not for my fandom.
Right.
Because if they would have lost to Michigan State, a team that couldn't do anything on offense at all and has looked not good this
and
year.
they had one really good quarter. The third quarter, they outscored Penn State 21-0.
Right. The second quarter.
Sorry, yeah, the second quarter. But then the key, and I was all on this, and like he kind of made me eat my words in the second half a little bit. But like, I'm full on. I appreciate the things that the Penn State defense has been able to do the last few years. But I am also a firm believer on that they don't get nearly the criticism they necessarily should have in some of the big games and big losses. If you go over the last 5 years and look at the big losses, a large number of them, Penn State has had leads or double-digit leads in like the second halves of some of these games, and the defense just makes bad plays. I feel like they refuse to make adjustments. Like, they refused to come out of, like, zone, like, defense, and they weren't getting any pressure up front.
Yeah.
Well, if you're not getting pressure, listen, man, they're just going to sit there all day. And that's exactly what happened. He was picking them apart. The kid never got a start before. Michigan State
He's
had
looking like a
averaged
seasoned veteran.
Michigan State had averaged 220 yards passing a game all year.
He had that in the first half.
He had that much in the first half.
Yeah. So
And the thing is, this isn't a one-off from Michigan State. And I know they've changed regimes there as well. But 2 years ago, they came into Penn State and did the exact same thing in a game Penn State should have won. In a game they were up big. And then they let Michigan State just catch fire. And the freshman or sophomore quarterback comes in and throws for 400 and some yards against them. Like, that's pathetic. And I was not having it in the second quarter. I was mad about that.
Oh, no. I mean, as everyone listening can imagine, you and I were texting a lot all weekend
because,
long.
like I told you, it's not just that. You know, you go back further. The year they lost to Ohio State and Michigan State in back-to-back weeks the first time.
I was going to say which year. So that was 2017.
They were up big on Ohio State, and they lost, and then they did the same thing against... Well, it actually happened 2 years in a row.
17 and 18.
That Michigan State game that year was the weird one with
that was like 3.5 hour rain delay in the middle of it.
After the emotional loss the week before. So, like, not that you're going to give a pass, but, like, I can understand how that's a weird game, right? And it's hard to stay
It
up.
happened both at home.
It did. They were up on Ohio State. They missed some tackles and let Ohio State get the lead, and they just couldn't. And then they had the terrible 4th and 5 call, which is I referenced that essentially today with you when Carolina has 4th and 8 and throws a 2-yard pass to a covered guy. And then the next week against Michigan State, they let the kid throw for 400 some yards against them. Like, it's one thing if you're out there and teams that are better than you are doing that, but Michigan State is not a team that should go out and throw for 400 yards against anyone ever.
Especially with a redshirt freshman making his first start. But obviously that didn't happen.
They had one bad quarter. The second quarter was bad. The rest of the game, the defense played really well. So I was happy for that. And I thought, again, at times, I thought they were looking much better at places. I feel like the offensive line plays really well when Juice Scruggs is in there. So there's plenty of things, and Kevon Lee looks good. They have a lot of young pieces that are starting. Now, I saw some of this, and I don't know that you necessarily want to get into too much of this, and we got to be careful because it is nuanced, and I feel like this isn't very nuanced. But Justin Fleming chose not to come to Penn State a couple years ago. And
Julian
Fleming. I was thinking of
Justin Fields.
Right, but
also chose not to come to Penn State.
But was it Justin Shorter that he was like the one? Was that the reason he gave? He talked about like that they didn't play one of the guys enough like his freshman year. And I think it was Shorter, but Shorter had been hurt most of the year
As a freshman.
But Julian Fleming, basically used that as his reason why he didn't want to come to Penn State. And that they don't use their freshmen enough, they don't get on the field. Essentially, is what he said
all the time.
And so somebody took that basically and then showed Parker Washington and
Lambert Smith's
stats
Lee
and
Julian Johnson.
Julian Fleming has 3 catches for 22 yards this year.
No.
Now, I say it's not nuanced. I say it's not nuanced because it would be unfair to say that getting onto the field as a freshman wide receiver at Penn State isn't different than getting onto the field, trying to work your way into the lineup at Ohio State.
Yeah.
But it would also be fair to be he's playing for Sean Clifford and, Will Levis, who they don't even let pass the ball half the time, more than half the time, and he's playing with Justin Fields. So it was just interesting. Now, that's 1 year in, and it's a weird year. So I have a feeling Julian Fleming's going to make his mark at Ohio State.
Eventually, right.
Right. But, it is interesting because, no, Penn State, gets their guys on the field.
Yeah, now, for sure. I mean, this year, undoubtedly.
Right.
So
good. If you're good enough, get on the field.
2 things before we switch to NFL, now that we're half an hour into the
sorry.
show. No, that's fine. I mean, this is our show. We can talk whatever we want. If we want to talk Army, Navy, and Penn State, we do that. first off, to continue the Penn State thing, there's one more game left in their season, at least, hopefully 2, but at least one more. They get to host Illinois next Saturday, December 19th.
Yeah, I'm pumped that they get to host it.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Get another home game. Not that they're going to make money off of it or anything.
No, but
it's comfort. It's
Right.
familiarity. You get another game at the
Right.
stadium that the seniors thought they were done. They get another one. That's great. They're playing a struggling opponent, one that doesn't have a head coach right now because Lovie Smith and Illinois both decided mutually to leave. In 5 years, they hadn't gotten done what either of them wanted.
Right.
Illinois thanked him, and it seemed that they were both like, yeah, it's probably time
Right.
to change it up. So they did that already. So who the heck knows what's going to happen? I hope Penn State comes out and is just ready to go take care of business and win their 4th straight, get to 4-5. If they get chosen for a bowl and go to the bowl, they have a chance to finish 500, which is
Penn State chooses
hard
to
to
go to a
think
bowl,
about.
I looked at some bowl projections today because now it has got my interest going. They were projected for 2 different bowls, one in Phoenix, one in like Nashville or something like that. But 2 different people who had them projected to go to a bowl. One had them playing West Virginia out in Arizona.
That'd be an old rivalry rekindled.
Right. The other one had them playing Virginia Tech, which would be interesting because I believe Virginia Tech might be on the schedule.
Weren't we supposed to play them this year?
We were. So maybe it's next year or it could be the year after. I don't know. I feel like it's this year. So maybe Auburn isn't on the schedule for 2 years.
No, they
yet.
are because I took a screenshot of it today and wanted to send it to you.
Okay.
Next year, Penn State starts at Wisconsin,
Yeah.
hosts Ball State, hosts Auburn, hosts Villanova, bye week, at Iowa, host Illinois, at Michigan State, host Indiana, at Maryland, host Michigan, at Ohio State, host Rutgers.
Wow.
You have Michigan and Ohio State back to back. Now Michigan's at home, but Ohio State's the penultimate week of the regular season, and it's at the shoe.
Right. That could be a huge game.
But you open the season at Wisconsin.
Right. Yeah, I don't like that because what did I tell you this year? What have I said over and over again? This is why Penn State schedules those games.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm gonna try and not complain about it when I like the opening one. I don't really ever care because like I'm so excited. But like usually when it's like the 3rd or 4th week and they're playing like the 3rd or 4th team that like you hope gets a win that year, you're like, all right, like
let's
okay.
get going. So they get at Wisconsin, Ball State, Auburn, Villanova at home, but Auburn's sitting right there. They're gonna have a new coach, Gus Malzahn, fired today. Did you see the buyout? $24 million, and half of it is due within a month. SEC boosters don't care about a pandemic.
I was gonna say SEC boosters, but like I'm like that's what I was thinking. Like right now, imagine being like the booster who's like, yeah, me and 20 of my buddies are all gonna write a $1 million check to buy him out on top of what we normally give.
Right.
Because then we're gonna have to pay for somebody to come here. Because like, guess what? The SEC coaches, SEC schools, they're gonna hire coaches who also have buyouts. You know, like
yeah. Oh, it's crazy, absolutely crazy. But
that's
the other
interesting.
thing
I wonder
was
who goes to Auburn like that.
the other thing was Hugh Freeze. The other thing was
That'll turn some heads at Ole Miss.
breaking
gosh.
on Twitter. This is just a what? It's not like a bad thing. It's just a sports related thing that I thought we should mention. It has been confirmed. I would assume for this season, but maybe not. That the Cleveland Indians are changing their name.
Oh, really?
Yeah, after 100+ years.
What are they?
They're changing it.
Did they say what they're changing it to?
No. This was an athletic breaking news. It was just a few minutes ago. After 105 years as the Indians, Cleveland's Major League Baseball team will undergo a name change per a New York Times report.
Wow.
So,
I mean, hey, if that's, well, yeah, that gets complicated. But like, I know they took Chief Wahoo off of their
did that
merchandise
They did it for a while
ago,
yeah.
which I understand. I mean, I guess if you're going to go that route, you should go that route. But you know, I know there's external pressure, but I like when it's quote unquote their decision. You know, like they weren't, because like as much noise as there is, Major League Baseball wasn't like, hey, you have to do it. Just like, well, see, I feel like Washington's a different story because they're so mismanaged.
I hate that they are called the football team, and I hate that it looks like it's sticking around for another year.
Well, that's because, well, I shouldn't say that's because, but I heard this early on when they said they were going to it for this. Somebody called out and was like, Dan Snyder just wants this because he knows as long as they don't have another team, everybody's still gonna think of them as the Redskins. And he's like, I'm telling you, they're not gonna change it until like they're kind of their hands forced. And I was like, if anybody would do that, it's Dan Snyder.
Yeah, I kind of thought it from the money perspective that they already spent money this year on a rebrand to the generic stuff.
That's true.
Maybe they just want to get at least 2 seasons worth out of it, and maybe it's just tough to do during a pandemic to get the proper naming and stuff like. But I'm all in on Red Tails. So
me too.
I
am too.
I want that.
I am too. And so this is off the topic. Well, not really, but like, I can't think of his name. Oh, Tobias Harris for the Sixers. His grandfather was a Tuskegee Airman.
Yeah.
Like, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's really cool. And like, it just, that I think would be a great.
I feel like that's a slam dunk. Like,
I don't see the downside of that.
You keep the red in the name.
Right.
And
you can keep a very similar like scheme as to what you have this year because I like their uniforms this year. You could add in.
They're too bland for me, but
right. But like I like the helmet with the number on the side. But like I also like some of the mock-ups for
the Red Tails were
unreal.
So good. They're
yes.
so good.
Like, but not only do you go from you wouldn't be going from like let's just say a negative, like.
Just divisive.
Right, a divisive, like, a mascot to neutral. You wouldn't be doing that. You'd be going from something divisive to something positive. Like,
right. And it has a military relationship.
Like, it's kind of like Patriots. Like, it's one of those things where, like, everybody knows what we're saying when we say, I hate the Patriots. But,
right.
like, like, it just, it sounds funny, but, like, everyone knows what you're talking about in sports. But, like, in theory, like, a Patriot, like, that's a positive thing. Like you'd be going to something that's positive. Like but what have I say this all the time? If anybody could screw it up,
right, it's Dan Snyder. So speaking of the NFL, let's give you some time here to talk about the Eagles because we didn't get to do it last week, and things have changed in a week's time. Obviously, we know at the end of last week's game, the last week's loss, Jalen Hurts came in, and then just a few days later. Doug Peterson announced that Jalen Hurts would get the start this week against the Saints at home in Philadelphia against the NFC's number 1 team. And, how'd that go?
They won. They won the game. So there's a lot to unpack here. But a couple things. One, I think you had to see what you have in Jalen Hurts. Now, you could make an argument that, like, you only have to do that because you drafted a quarterback in the 2nd round. Like, if you drafted a quarterback in the 4th round, nobody's going to be like, I shouldn't say nobody, but there's going to be less of a, what do we have here, like all of that stuff. I still, and I said this at the end of last week's show, if Carson Wentz is broken, the Eagles have broken him. I know everyone, and I heard it a ton of times on the broadcast today, everybody references the 2017 season, when in my opinion, he was still the MVP. He got hurt on this weekend in 2017, right? So we were far through the season. Tom Brady squeaked out the MVP, and he did have a great year. But like, I feel like for the majority of the year, Carson Wentz was the better player. Another part that people think about, then they talk about how like, oh well, Peterson got it done with Foles. If you look at Foles had 2 good games that year. 2. He played good against the Vikings, and he played great in the Super Bowl. Now, don't get me wrong. Like,
pretty important.
He played his 2 biggest games in the 2 biggest games.
Right.
But he was bad to close out the regular season, and he was not good against the Falcons in the opening round of the Eagles' first playoff game that year. Like, he was not good. Now, I've told you, and I'm very clear about this, I'm forever indebted to Nick Foles and the job he did that year.
But people calling for him to plant Wentz.
But Nick Foles lost, like, and I know it wasn't crazy, but like, it wasn't there the next year, and you saw it early on. It wasn't there, and they rushed Wentz back, and that kind of messed with things. But last year, Wentz threw for over 4,000 yards. Didn't have a single receiver that had over 500 yards. He's the first quarterback to ever do that. Had 27 touchdowns to 7 interceptions. Like, last year the problem wasn't Wentz. They won their last 4 games to make the playoffs, including beating the Cowboys head-to-head in a game that they had no business winning. None. Right? Like, one of the things they said today was like, no one could have ever foreseen the offensive line issues they have this year. Really? Because they had pretty much the same thing last year. Like, couldn't keep anyone healthy, couldn't block anyone. Now, to shift to like what we saw with Hurts, I was impressed. He played better than I thought he was going to today.
Yeah,
I shouldn't say better than I thought he was going to. Better than he exceeded my expectations today. The running was great. I am a little bit frustrated because I was telling anybody that would listen.
They changed the offense.
It's going to be frustrating when they call a different game when he's in there, and they did. Now,
oh my gosh, it was night and day.
Not the just pure runnings, but the rollouts. Now, here's the thing. Through the early...
Whoa.
Oh, my gosh.
Oh,
I thought it was bad. Through the first half of the game, Jalen Hurts' numbers were better from throwing in the pocket than on the move. Now, some of that is when you're running, it's not always a designed rollout, and you need to get rid of the ball, and so you throw it away. But he made some really nice throws. Some nice throws downfield, which is good. They got the ball in the hands of the playmakers. And that's what they should have done like all the time. I've told you the stats are insane about how they don't get Miles Sanders the ball. Well, they got him the ball today.
Yeah, they did.
Now, I'd also be, again, it is nuanced. Like, they're able to, it is different trying to defend Miles Sanders when Jalen Hurts is back there versus when Carson Wentz is back there. Like, I'll give them that. Like, that is different. I worry about building your NFL offense around the zone read just because I don't know how sustainable it is, because look at every one of the quarterbacks that does it can be really good, and it's a great weapon to have. But if that is the thing your offense does, you're in trouble. Right? Like, it's awesome.
Ask Penn State.
Right. It's awesome. Well, Penn State's a perfect example of this. On Saturday, they started throwing the ball on first down sometimes, and then the zone read worked. Imagine that.
Yeah.
But when you run it every play, or every time Will Levis comes in the game,
quarterback is in,
like, everybody knows what's coming. So, like, Jalen Hurts helped Miles Sanders today, but they put, like, that's the problem. Doug put them in a position to win by his play calling today that he hasn't done all year.
Yeah, all year.
Like, where is that? And that's the problem I have. And somebody said, like, okay, Doug's 11-2 when Carson Wentz isn't his starting quarterback. And I think that's part of the problem. And so there were all kinds of reports flying around this morning. Multiple reports. ESPN, I think it was Schefter and Ian Rappaport from NFL Network, both reported that Philadelphia has no intention of getting rid of Carson Wentz. Like, that they plan on doing this. But then some other things started to fly around as well, saying, like, there's a lot of steam, like, because you and I talked about, like, who would trade for him. But apparently, and I've thought a little bit about this too, and I think I brought it up. In a survey of the 31 other GMs, anonymous, so like their names weren't on it, but all 31 said they would not trade Carson Wentz. Not that they wouldn't trade for him. They would not trade him if he was in their organization and they had Jalen Hurts. Like, they wouldn't trade him. Now, some of that might depend on how, they might be taking into account the contract and all that other stuff.
And before Jalen played a snap.
Right.
As a starter.
So, but like, they're saying, like, there is reason to believe there is a market for him and that somebody would want him. And the way we see quarterbacks in the NFL, I'd find it hard to believe that nobody would want him.
Yeah, I can't see that.
Right. There is, and I can see this coming. There's some, they say it could be gaining traction, that the Colts could be a landing place for him.
Indianapolis, man.
And that's what they're saying. They're like, and they said it on the broadcast today, they're like, they think Wentz misses Frank Reich. And I would wholeheartedly agree. Frank Reich was the mastermind of that offense. They worked well together. That was a team of destiny, that 2017 Eagles team. Like, it was. They had a great defense. They had a mix of the veteran guys. But here, you want to talk, I said the Eagles failed Carson Wentz. I know this is looping around and jumping back to it. I think it was 2014 that was the year. Since 2014, the Eagles have drafted one player that has made the Pro Bowl.
Wow.
One, and it's Carson Wentz.
I was going to say, it's got to be Wentz from 20.
Think about how terrible that is.
So, other Eagles have made it, but they weren't drafted by Philadelphia.
Or they were drafted before 2014.
Oh, right. Fletcher Cox.
Fletcher Cox is the one there. Right. How insane is that?
That is really crazy.
You won a Super Bowl. You had a bunch of guys, but what was the key to that team? They had some young guys, but they got the right pieces in free agency. And here's the thing with Howie Roseman. He is, in my opinion, terrible at evaluating talent. He's the best at manipulating the salary cap. I say the best. I will always go back to this stat that I heard before this year when they talked about the Chiefs, that the Chiefs had $177 of cap space coming into this season. And they signed their quarterback to a $500 million deal. They signed Travis Kelce to like a record tight end deal.
There's ways to massage that
right,
all
like so
over
you
the
can
place.
make it work. And that's what they're saying. Like while the Wentz situation isn't ideal, they said if Hurts looks good, the end part of here, they said Wentz is probably going to want out, which makes it a different scenario as well. Like if he's looking, because then all of a sudden you're looking, and again, I think. But they said the Eagles, the pressure isn't on to trade them because they didn't sign him to the contract this year. They signed him last year. So they'd already been planning for budgeting for next year. So the pressure isn't necessarily on the Eagles to trade him because they've already planned to have him. And they still plan to have him. But, like, I don't know. The thing becomes with the Colts, like...
At least it's...
If you're going to trade him, you have to trade him to AFC. You have to trade him to AFC. And you get what you can from the Colts, who are a decent team, so it's not going to be like real high picks. But you're not getting real high picks. But like, the Eagles need quantity of picks. Get quantity of picks.
The thing is, I mean, I think the Eagles would be lucky to get a third.
No, I agree.
I agree. I think you're locking like a 4th and a 6th or something like that.
Right. And I think that's where the Colts are an interesting one because of the Frank Reich connection. Like, I feel like if Reich wants it to happen,
well, it all hinges on how they do the rest of this year and Phillip Rivers. Because they only signed a 1-year deal, but if he wants to come back and you go to the AFC Championship game or something, you're probably going to bring him back.
Right.
That's my thinking.
And here, you also get the idea of, and so I've thought of this one too, and I don't know, but I just start looking at places where I think Wentz could be successful. I want him to be successful with the Eagles.
Does he have a no trade clause? Do you know? They don't.
No, they're almost
it's very
unheard
rare
of in the NFL, right? I could see him thriving in Cleveland. Like I thought of that, and so here's the thing: Baker has next year on his.
This is his 3rd year,
right? So
they already picked up the option.
I don't know that they have yet.
So they would need to do that.
They have to do that before the spring. And they will, because they'll have them under control. But I could see that being a landing spot. I could see a place where they're committed to run the ball. They have a solid defense. They have weapons. Like
here's an interesting one.
It'll be interesting because they got the picks like from Cleveland when they were like maneuvering around.
So look out in the AFC West. Obviously the Chiefs are good.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have to worry about it right now. The Raiders are currently in on Carr, but I mean, you could see that possibly happening.
Yeah,
If
Gruden's on to the next quarterback all the time too.
Broncos possible.
Right.
It's possible.
Drew Lock had a great day today though.
He did.
I want Drew Lock to be so good. I don't know that he is, but I want him to be just because I like Denver. And KJ Hamler, man, two touchdowns today.
Huge
4
Sunday
on the year.
For Penn State.
4 or 5 on the year now
Huge
for him.
day for Penn State offensive players.
Yes.
Allen Robinson.
Allen Robinson had over 100 yards and a touchdown.
Miles Sanders.
Over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns.
KJ Hamler. 2
touchdowns.
Jasicki.
2 touchdowns. Right.
Hopefully he's not hurt significantly.
Yeah, oh gosh.
But the only other team then left are the Chargers, and they just got Herbert, so they're out. So, probably 2 maybes out in the West.
Right.
You never know what's going to happen with Las Vegas and Denver,
especially with John Elway in Denver. Like, if John Elway wants Carson Wentz, he'll go get him.
Yeah. So AFC South. We already talked. Indianapolis is a definite possibility.
The guy John Elway has had success with, he got in free agency. Like it wasn't a guy he drafted; it was a guy he went out and got. Now, to be clear, I'm not saying Carson Wentz is Peyton Manning. Like,
Well, no.
but
we already said that if Philip Rivers retires or
Yeah.
doesn't want to play again in Indianapolis, though I can't see that happening. Indy is obviously an option. Tennessee, I think they're all in on Tannehill right now.
and it should be.
Yeah, they're
like, in my
playing really
opinion.
well.
I don't know that Wentz is an upgrade over Tannehill the way he's played last year and this year under Vrabel.
Obviously, Houston is fine with Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, they're not moving on.
Jacksonville.
They're going to draft someone. So
Right, but I'm just saying, like, right now, Jacksonville is a team that needs a quarterback.
Right.
But they're going to be in line to possibly get Trevor Lawrence. We'll see what happens between them and the Jets. In the AFC East, and there's a reason I'm saving the AFC North for last. The AFC East, Dolphins just drafted Tua, so no. Jets, maybe, depending on what happens with Trevor Lawrence again. Like, they obviously need a quarterback. You think that they're going to move on from Sam Darnold, which may be crazy, but that's the way the NFL works. Bills, no. What about the Patriots? Like, if they're done with Cam Newton after this 1 year, is that a team that could be interested in a reclamation project?
Does it scare you?
I mean, yes, because like everything the Patriots do scares me.
Right. If they were to trade for a quarterback and bring him in, it really doesn't matter who it is. I'm like,
that would terrify me. That would absolutely terrify me.
A quarterback who has shown he can play at an MVP level wasn't this year. Like, I can't say he was this year. Like, he wasn't. But like, he's done it, and he's done it more than once. Yeah.
So then the AFC North. You already mentioned Cleveland because you weren't sure about like what are they going to do about Baker. Right. Obviously, right now they're on the upswing, so everyone thinks okay with Baker. Cincinnati just drafted Joe Burrow. Hopefully he's healthy and they don't have to worry about it. Baltimore is all in on Lamar Jackson. The Steelers. And Ben Roethlisberger.
Yeah.
When is that marriage coming to an end?
Well, see, if Ben doesn't get hurt at the end of the season, I think like he wants to keep playing. He wants to keep playing. Although he's throwing around that retire thing, he's all about the drama, man. He is so about the drama. But I think Wentz would be great there.
With those receivers,
here's the thing: they can't run the ball either right now. But like,
no, they showed a stat. I have the game up. They showed a stat a little bit ago. They were leading the league in rushing through the first 6 weeks, and the last 6 weeks they're dead last.
So here's a stat I'm sure you've heard. This is just another AFC North team. The Browns are 9-3. I think.
Yep. With the game pending tomorrow night.
And I think they're minus 15 point differential on the season.
Oh, well, see, that's why I'm not a believer in them, because that always works itself out.
They might be plus 21 now, because I feel like that was before last week's game, which they were blowing out and would have corrected it, but then they didn't blow them out. Right.
Let them back in the game.
Either way, oh no, I guess it wouldn't be. Yeah, but like I'm at like
if they're
it's
hovering around being even, that 9-3 is a facade.
Right, and that's what people said. Right.
But I've been saying that. That's why I was so surprised they beat Tennessee last week.
Yeah, I wasn't necessarily surprised they beat them. I was surprised they blew the doors off them in the first half.
For the most part.
No, I was also surprised that Tennessee came back because
they're not a hurry up and score type team.
But against the Browns.
But man, Derrick Henry today.
Whew.
All right, so
here's the thing, and I had this discussion with a fellow Eagles fan this week. I was like, what is your worst case scenario? And he's like, worst case scenario is Hurts goes out and sucks, because then you have two quarterbacks who can't get it done right now. And he's like, I'm not saying they can't get it done in the future. He's like, but that's the worst case scenario. And I was like, you know what? That's a good perspective. I agree. As an Eagles fan, I'm happy for Hurts. I'm a believer in Wentz, and I like Wentz. They got it done today with Hurts, and I'm happy to see that. I'm not rooting against him because I want him to do well, because I want the team to do well.
Right.
It's not like he's this like, I don't know. It would be different if, I don't know. I guess it could be a different scenario, but like, I don't dislike Hurts. I kind of like him from college. Like, I like the story about how like he sucked it up and helped his team in Alabama even when he lost his job to Tua. And he helped him big. Like, it was the SEC championship game he came in.
National championship.
No.
Didn't he come in both? Or did
Tua
replace
him in the national championship
right.
game?
And
then he replaced Tua
in the SEC
championship game the next year, right? Like, so
and then he transfers to
Jalen Hurts' freshman year was the year I went to the SEC championship game, and he came on the field. I'm like, the dude looks like a linebacker. Like, he looks like a linebacker, and that was a close game of Florida, and then they blew the doors off Florida. But it was fun to see.
Were there any shoes thrown?
No. Oh my gosh, that was so crazy.
We don't have time for that.
Oh my gosh. Talk about nuts. I kind of want them to beat Alabama now, just for that to be a thing. But wow.
So it'll be an interesting offseason in Philadelphia. Of course, they're not even out of the playoffs yet.
Well, and I did mention to you, I really, really want to keep perspective on this and have it not be a Kevin Kolb thing, because Kevin Kolb played the home opener in 2008 when you and I were there, and that
was week 2.
Home opener. Yeah, against the Saints, the year the Saints won the Super Bowl.
Won the Super Bowl, yeah.
And you and I, Kevin Kolb threw for 300 some yards, something ridiculous.
In the loss.
And you and I were there and were like, yeah, he was all right, but it wasn't that great, because there were guys wide open down the field and he was throwing into coverage somewhere else, and you're like,
what's going on?
Yeah, okay, but we didn't get the whole Kevin Kolb needs to be the starter. Kevin Kolb needs to be the starter. I don't know, man. It wasn't that impressive of a performance in person. I'm not saying that's what Hurts was today, because I feel like he exceeded expectations. I thought he did better than what he had great numbers in terms of running, and it was very balanced, but his throws were good. He made some contested throws. That's key. He got the ball out of his hand quick, all of those things. But I hope it's not just a one-time thing. You're also playing the Saints without Drew Brees, so
right.
How often can you bank on the Saints only scoring 17 points? He fumbled late, which again, it's not that big of a deal because they held on to win, but they also tried to screw it up. The Eagles did some very Eagles things today. The onside kick at the end of the game, they go and it's going to be the same kick that was used by Dallas earlier in the year. The ball's spinning, the Eagles try to go get it, it hits an Eagles leg. The Saints had 2 guys there. They had to have recovered it, and the Eagles took it out under the pile, because that's what the replay pretty much showed. But the Eagles got the ball and were able to just down it. But Hurts had fumbled when he was running, then when they're just trying to run out the clock, that was 3rd down. They were going to have to punt anyway. But that could have been a big thing. But hey, they won. They played better today all around than they have all year. So it's kind of weird. It's kind of hard to explain. I put some of that on coaching, because Doug coaches the game differently when Wentz isn't in there.
Right.
And we've seen it multiple times now. And I don't get that. Whatever it is, if it's Wentz, if it's Doug, whatever it is, that either needs to get worked out or one of them has to go. Right? And I don't know how that works out given the situation.
It'll be an interesting offseason, that's for sure.
But the thing becomes okay, who do you think you have the better chance of winning a Super Bowl with again? Putting the right people around Wentz and getting the most out of him, or giving the people that Doug works best with around him? I mean, it's tough because Doug's done it. But Wentz was MVP caliber stuff with Doug.
I prefer your coaches to adapt to your players rather than trying to shove players into a system.
Right. Coaches, I always talk, your job is to put your players in a position to win. Right? And if you got to use the weapons you have. And Howie's done a terrible job of giving you weapons. But
the last few years, yeah.
But you need to make it work. But I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. And now I'm man, they could win their next 3 games and make the playoffs.
That's just adding fuel to the fire, though, man, for an interesting offseason.
It's going to be pure fire.
Because, I mean, look at how many supporters Foles drubbed up. I mean, I don't want to say just from winning a Super Bowl, but, that's it. He got... I don't want to say lucky. He played to his potential when it mattered most, and now he is a legend. But look at the rest of his career.
He lost his starting job in Philly. He lost his starting job with the Rams. He lost his starting job,
sort of.
Kind of. Well, he was a backup in Philly, but he got forced. They rushed back to Wentz. He lost the starting job in Jacksonville, and he lost the starting job in Chicago.
To Mitchell Trubisky.
Right. I love Nick Foles. I'm forever indebted to Nick Foles.
He's not the answer.
He's not a starting quarterback in the NFL.
He's a backup.
And
that you
maybe the best backup of all time.
that you can rely on to win if you need him. Let's look what he did for Chicago and Atlanta.
Yeah.
When he came in.
Yeah.
He and everyone was all aboard, and it didn't pan out.
But that's another one. Look at Chicago. There's more questions than answers there right now.
Yeah. Detroit, the Chargers.
Tell me you didn't see it.
I know what you're talking about.
The Chargers
the
before
weird field
halftime.
goal thing. The I'm gonna go for it. I'm gonna kick a field goal. They had no timeouts. They tried to change with 6 seconds left.
Yeah, and didn't get it off.
Oh yeah, the Chargers ended up winning. So that's
Right.
what I want to run through the scores real quickly here. Thursday night, the Rams beat the Patriots. The Patriots scored 45 points last week at the Chargers. This week in LA, 3.
Yeah.
The Rams win that one 24-3. New England has 7 losses in a season for the first time since 2002.
That's insane.
The Broncos and Panthers shootout, 59 points scored. Denver and Drew Lock win 32-27, and that was an entertaining game that had really no impact on anything that's happening. Don't think either team has any chance of making the playoffs. The Bears absolutely obliterated the Texans today,
Yeah.
which was a bit of a shock because Houston, by and large, have been playing better. I know Houston was without a lot of their receivers. That was tough. I needed a big game from Deshaun Watson. Did not happen. He also got injured off and on late. But this is Chicago's first win against the Texans ever. So congratulations to the Bears. They remain in the playoff hunt, although a little bit on the outside. The Cowboys beating up on the Bengals today, 30-7, keeps Dallas in the playoff picture because of the NFC East, even though they're only 4-9. Andy Dalton gets some revenge against his former team. Green Bay clinches the NFC North with a sweep of the series against the Lions in Detroit today, 31-24. And combine that with the Eagles' victory over the Saints, Green Bay now controls the number 1 seed in the NFC. Tennessee moves to 9-4 with a convincing 31-10 victory over Jacksonville. The Jaguars have now lost 12 in a row, and this is the 5th straight season that the Titans have won at least 9 games.
Imagine being as bad as the Jaguars and you're not even going to get the number 1 pick because the Jets are worse.
A team that's worse.
And to be honest, right now, well, today's probably a bad example, but last week, I'm not sure if I would have told you the Jets are worse than the Jaguars, but
Yeah. Too bad they don't play in Week 17. How crazy would that be?
That would be an NFL nightmare because you'd have 2 teams that want to
lose.
lose playing each other. Both teams want to lose, but playing each other, that would be bad.
Play for the tie. So a game that I was hoping to talk about a little bit, but it's really late. The Chiefs-Dolphins game today, the Chiefs won 33-27. They clinched the AFC West for, I think, the 5th straight year. Andy Reid, man, getting it done. Kansas City moves to 12-1. My Dolphins fall to 8-5. Miami jumped out to a 10-0 lead, and obviously that was very dangerous. I didn't like it. We all know what Kansas City did in the playoffs, including the Super Bowl last year, and it quickly evaporated from a 10-0 Miami lead to a 30-10 Chiefs lead. Miami fought back, which kudos to them, and that's all credit to the coaching staff and players buying into that. They were able to cut it to 33-27, but they weren't able to cover an onside kick and make things happen. Tua Tagovailoa had his best game as a pro. He finally got things clicking. And as I said to Justin before the game started, I'm not making excuses because I don't think Miami has any chance of beating them in Kansas City or at a neutral site, at least not often. However,
I can't help but watch that and be like, Dolphins are ahead of schedule.
Well, yeah, that's my point. Is that think about this team last year, especially the first half of last year, playing against Kansas City. No way was that game staying under 50 points scored by the Chiefs. Miami jumped out to a lead. They were wrecking havoc on Patrick Mahomes. 3 interceptions. They forced another fumble. 4 turnovers for the team that was tied for the lowest in the league. Gave up 4 today to the Dolphins defense. The Dolphins were without their 2 starting linebackers.
Mahomes had thrown 2 picks all year, threw 2 in the first quarter.
And 3 overall today. Miami was out the 2 of their 3 starting linebackers. Throughout the game, 2 of their safeties went in and out, including on one of the big touchdown passes. He was not in the game. Miami was on their 4th string running back. Mike Gesicki and Devontae Parker, the 2 leading receivers, left the game.
Right.
So I don't want to make excuses for injuries, but I would like to see if they could have a full
if they can
healthy
get
roster.
if they can win some games coming down. I saw this, and this was not ideal for you. But like the math of it, the Dolphins have a 39% chance as of right now. Now tonight's game can influence that a little bit,
And it's going Miami's way at the
Right.
moment.
but 39% chance right now, and they're sitting in that 7th spot at this moment. The problem is the Ravens are sitting in that 8th spot. Now, the Ravens don't play till tomorrow, so their numbers could change drastically too, especially if they don't win tomorrow. Are sitting at like 52%.
Because they have an easier schedule.
Right, because they play the Browns tomorrow, but their remaining 3 games are against Cincinnati, the Giants, who looked awful
They
today
didn't
with
look good
Daniel
today
Jones
at
back
all.
in it. Now, I understand Daniel Jones is not 100%, but if that's the effort you're going to get from him, leave
Go
Colt
back to Colt
McCoy
McCoy,
in,
yeah.
man. You have the division to play for here. Like, I don't understand that. That was a bad loss for them. The way it went down, too, because Arizona has looked lifeless the last few weeks and
They beat up on them
didn't
pretty
look
good.
that great today, but looked better than them. Sorry. But, yeah, the Ravens' remaining schedule is not very tough.
It's
So
cakewalk, yeah.
Right.
So if they upset the Browns tomorrow night, they could probably end on a 4-game winning streak, which would get them to what? Would that get them to 11-5?
Yeah, and maybe, and I guess they would have both wins over the Browns, but the Browns would still need to lose another game. They could go 11-5 and finish in 3rd in their
But
division.
Cleveland plays Pittsburgh again.
You're right.
For sure.
Right.
It's just interesting. Honestly, I want Cleveland to win tomorrow. Sorry, Cheryl. I need Cleveland to win tomorrow. For a while, I thought Cleveland was going to be fighting for.
Here's
they're
the
still
thing, too, and
technically
it would be
fighting for a
really
wild
interesting.
card.
If the Ravens were to win tomorrow and then win out and make the playoffs, it would be very interesting because they've lost their first playoff game in the last 2 years. But, like, it would give the impression that they're getting hot, even though we just talked about their competition isn't that great down the stretch here.
Right. But sometimes that builds a confidence and
Right.
momentum.
Sometimes perception becomes reality with that
Yeah.
stuff. And, like, if you think you're hitting your stride at the right time, and you're confident going in, especially, they looked good last week.
Yeah.
So,
We'll see.
Yeah.
So, anyways, to finish my Miami comment, like you said, they're ahead of schedule. If they don't make the playoffs this year, it'll be disappointing. I'll be very upset about the Denver loss. That one makes me mad. But they have the opportunity to still take care of business and make the playoffs. They have to beat New England next week. It's in Miami. They have to go to Vegas and beat the Raiders. And then they could be playing, depending on what happens, either for the AFC's title or at least a wild card spot. It depends what Buffalo is able to do the next few weeks. They're currently losing
but again,
to Pittsburgh.
if you look at the Dolphins, if they were to be in a spot to make the playoffs, given their schedule, that's not a team I'd want to play.
No, because they have to play the AFC West and the NFC West.
You know what I mean? Like, so, like, if they make it, like, given their schedule,
With a team that is winning with defense and special teams and hoping the offense can
and
get
they're
hot.
going to, and we talked about this next year. They're going to have Houston's picks too.
I was going through this today. I know we're running really long and we got to get moving, but I was going through this in my mind today. Wherever the Houston pick ends up being, it could be anywhere from like 7 to 12, I think, right now.
Mm-hmm.
I want them with that first pick to go all in on defense and take Micah Parsons.
There you go.
Add him to the linebacking group. Just make the defense even better, and then you still have your pick, which will probably be around 20-ish, somewhere in there. Then get your wide receiver. Get Jalen Waddle. Get Devontae Smith. Get one of those big name receivers. I mean, get one of those guys.
Alabama has 2 first-round worthy
for the second year in a row. They had Judy, Ruggs, and Waddle and Smith on the same team.
I'd be surprised if Mac Jones doesn't go in the first round too. Like, he didn't play super great this week, but like, they're so good, man.
Oh, it's crazy. You mentioned Cardinals win over the hapless Giants, 26-7. Hassan Reddick, 5 sacks, 3 forced fumbles for the Cardinals. Vikings lose in Tampa Bay. Buccaneers coming off a bye. Tampa Bay wins at 26-14. Colts, Raiders, Indianapolis pulls this one out and hurts Vegas' chances at the playoffs, which is great for my Dolphins.
And
that was
again,
the exact right
I
scenario.
know they beat the Jets last week, but Vegas is on this skid
Destroyed
now.
by Atlanta. Should have probably lost to the Jets. Now lose to the Colts.
By the way, all that talk we did about how the Jets blew it at the end, they fired Greg Williams Monday morning last week.
Yeah.
As they should.
You also mentioned the Seahawks destroying the Jets today. 40-3. Jets fall to 0-13. It's the longest losing streak in team history for the New York Jets. Chargers, despite Anthony Lynn's best attempts to screw something up, get the victory over the visiting Falcons today, 20-17. Michael Badgley hit the game-winning 40-yard field goal as time expired.
That's an interesting one because Anthony Lynn is going to be gone. That'll be interesting to see who they hire because Justin Herbert is the guy. I'm not saying he's going to be like a legend, but he is clearly the guy that you're going to roll with for the foreseeable future there. It'll just be interesting because that's not always the case. Usually you have your coach in place and then you go kind of get your guy. I don't think that's going to be how it's going to work here. I think they got their guy. Now they're going to have to go
find the coach that'll work with him.
Which isn't necessarily a bad spot to be in, but it's just going to be interesting.
Eagles upset the Saints 24-21. We talked about that a lot.
Put the Packers as the 1 seed now. 2
individual 100-yard rushers in Miles Sanders and Jalen Hurts. And the Saints hadn't allowed a 100-yard rusher in how many games?
55 games.
And they allowed 2 in 1 game today. Lastly, the football team went to play the 49ers in Arizona and won 23-15. Gutsy game from Washington. And Dwayne Haskins finished that game after Alex Smith hurt his leg. Hopefully Alex can get back, but Haskins got the job done. And Washington leapfrog New York, the Giants.
Chase Young looks like a beast.
Did you see the one where he was dropping in the covers and then just read it and came up and drilled Mullins?
Did you hear that banter with him and Tomlin last week? Where Tomlin's like, I never want to be in a position where I can draft a guy like you. He's like, because guys like you aren't going to, like, he's like, you got to lose like 14, 15 games a year to get guys like you. Like, and it was funny because
ask the Redskins.
He's like,
ask the Jets.
Right.
Ask the Jaguars. So, to put a cherry on top, I mentioned my betting loss to my father, then the betting loss with Penn State. Despite Penn State winning, they won by too much.
Right.
And then I also thought,
we're just too good.
Hey, hedge my bet. I don't think the Dolphins are going to hang with the Chiefs. I think the Chiefs are at least a 10 to 14 point better. 7 points, I'll take that. And what did Miami do? They kicked the field goal with like 40 seconds left to cut it to 6 points. Hope to get the onside kick to maybe force it. If they would have got the onside kick and then drove down the field and won, I would not have cared.
Right.
But because they kicked the field goal and then didn't get it and ended up losing by 6, you've got to be kidding me. So it was just rough weekend for me in terms of. At least Penn State won.
There's a reason the lights stay on in Vegas.
That's right. They're wizards out there. So my free money is gone. Hey, that's all right. That's fine. It was fun. It was fun while it lasted. So my saving grace right now is I'm currently winning in the fantasy playoffs against Greg. I am done. I have a 20.5 point lead.
Okay.
All he has left is Jarvis Landry tomorrow night.
Okay.
So while I want the Browns to win, I cannot have Baker Mayfield have a connection with Jarvis Landry. Because if he scores a touchdown, I'm in trouble.
Yeah.
I'm in trouble. Because if he goes over 100 yards and gets a touchdown, that's 18 points right there. So obviously he needs a big game, but he's capable of it because the Browns are better without Odell Beckham. So, I mean, where's the lie? Since he's been out, what has that team been able to do?
So, yeah, you're right. And here's another one that I found interesting. They were talking about since Antonio Brown had been signed by the Buccaneers, Stevie Miller? Scotty Miller had 4 targets. 4. He caught a bomb touchdown pass.
I saw that today.
They were just talking about how, like, forcing AB into that offense has maybe...
unnecessary.
Right. Like, when you had something that's working, you have weapons already. You don't... I just think... I know that's, like, blasphemy to some people who are like, oh, the talent is everything.
Sometimes you need... A long time ago in the NHL video game, they used to designate each player a certain, like, skill. Like, you would have an offensive defenseman. You'd have a sniper. You have, like, the gritty guy. And if you worked that correctly, you would get skill bumps because they worked together. But you didn't want to all be snipers. You didn't want to all have stay-at-home defense. You know, you wanted to have a nice mix because moderation is better than leaning one way or the other.
Being
That'll
balanced.
work against some teams, but not against others. Right. The more balanced you are, the better in the long run, the more likely you are to be able to win in any situation. And I think, like we've seen in Cleveland, where they're just trying to jam talented, athletic people in, it doesn't always work. When you subtract a big name, oh my gosh, look, they're playing better.
Right.
So it's interesting. It's a lot of the the psychology of athletics. So
Yeah, and it's a perfect example of one of those where, like, and again, it's a bit unfair because I have no idea, but, like, who's more likely to go out there and be like, I'm going to do whatever it is you need me to do? I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's Scotty Miller.
Right.
Is more likely to be like,
then Antonio Brown.
whatever
yeah,
you need me to do. You know.
So.
But I just have a hunch that's how it goes down.
Right. All right. Well, it's December 13th, and episode 319 is in the books. We'll be back next Sunday, December 20th, to talk about NFL's Week 15. And both of us will probably know much better where our teams stand in terms of NFL playoff possibilities. Both our teams still in it, not in line for a great spot at the moment. Very tenuous grasp on a spot for the Dolphins and the Eagles outside looking in, but it's not over yet. So you're telling me there's a chance.
There's a chance.
There's a chance for both our teams.
I feel like the Eagles are just hurting their draft position right now, though. But
I do want to say, since by the time we get on the show next time, it'll have just passed my dad's birthday, but I want to wish him an early happy birthday. I don't have anything else to say to him because I'm mad at him for beating me in the Army-Navy bet. And he's been bragging about fantasy, so I'm trying to beat Greg this week because if I do, I most likely play him next week, which is fun with our birthdays back-to-back. And I can come on the show next week and either be really mad because I lost to my dad for a third time this year, or super happy because I upset him.
You beat him in the one time that matters
right,
the most.
that's the one that matters. And it was to go to the championship. Yeah. So, huge fantasy showdown as long as I can make sure Jarvis Landry doesn't have a good game tomorrow night.
Yeah, there we go.
And then I'll be moving on. So, anything else to say before we go?
No.
All right. Well, that's it for this episode of the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show. We will be back in 1 week's time to talk about everything football once again, because why not?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. We'll see you all later. Thanks for listening.
That's a wrap on this episode of the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show, brought to you by Mays Sandwich Shop. Woo-hoo! You can watch each weekly episode live on Facebook, Periscope, or YouTube. Be sure to like, follow, or subscribe to the show on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, and Google Play. You can also rate and review us on many of these platforms as well. We'd love to hear from you. Send your emails to the Mays Sandwich Shop inbox at joemaysandjraff@gmail.com. The Joe Mays and J-Raff Show is a part of the JMNJR Radio Network, home to other productions such as The Bulldog Hour, Tangents with Friends, and Nat Chats with Dad. Until next time.